Long ago, there was a television network known as the History Channel, and it featured shows about actual history. But today, we have a scandal-ridden reality TV outlet called History. Here are some of its worst offenses against actual reality. It's one of the world's most ridiculous conspiracy theories. The government is filling the air with chemicals so that they can control the weather. Most people understand that this idea is ridiculous, because if it was actually true that the government was filling the air with chemicals in a bid to alter the weather patterns of the United States and beyond, they appear to be really bad at it. Most people think the idea is dumb, except History Channel, who evidently felt like it was worth discussing in an episode of That's Impossible called Weather Warfare. The special basically just repeated the whole conspiracy theory and provided a platform to the paranoid people who actually believe it, which is not a great thing to do in an era where half the population already doesn't trust science. Pawn Star's favorite, Austin Lee Russell, is better known by his nickname Chumlee. He's portrayed as the comic foil at the gold and silver pawn shop where he's often the butt of jokes.
Got the squash blossom.
It takes me 20 minutes to go home.
Well, I had to stop and get gas.
Chumlee, 4 hours.
Occasionally, he'll impress his fellow pawn shop workers with his talent at the game of pinball. More frequently, he'll deliver his lines in a way that lets you know the money is only barely keeping him on the show.
Actually, this thing might even be older than I am.
Doubt it.
In non-televised reality, though, Chumlee's life is somewhat less whimsical and comedic. Police carried out a search of his house while following up on sexual assault allegations in 2016. They didn't find the evidence to convict Chumlee of sexual assault, but they did find drugs in his regrettably named Chum Chum room, including marijuana and meth, as well as numerous illegal firearms and quite a few items usually found with people who package and sell narcotics. The reality star was able to avoid time with a plea deal, despite being charged with quite a few felonies. Reality television is part exploitation, part making fun of people who deserve it, and part totally, utterly, and completely fake. But there are lines that even reality television producers try not to cross, and the producers of American Jungle definitely crossed one or two of them. The 2013 show American Jungle was short-lived, so you might not even remember it. It was presented as a show about native Hawaiians from rival groups fighting each other over hunting territory. The Hawaiian government was certainly not amused, claiming the show portrayed the participants in a culturally insensitive way, as well as portraying Hawaii's history inaccurately. According to officials in Hawaii, the show depicted illegal activities too, such as hunting at night and hunting feral cattle without a permit. We're not sure how much any of this had to do with the show's swift cancellation, but it didn't get past its first 8 episodes. Shows about hidden treasure and unsolved historical mysteries tend to do well for history, but as anyone who was inspired by Indiana Jones can tell you, real treasure hunting is super boring.
A neat collection. George Washington's campaign buttons. You're missing the 1789 inaugural, though. I found one once.
That's very fortunate for you.
So to get people to actually tune into a show about treasure, you kinda need to sensationalize, embellish, and just make things up as you go along. With that in mind, the accuracy of most treasure hunting shows is questionable at best. The history show Pirate Treasure of the Knights Templar was a short-lived series starring forensic geologist Scott Wolter and treasure hunter Barry Clifford. Their team was searching sunken wrecks off the coast of Madagascar that they believed were connected to the Portuguese Templars. The show was called out for unprofessionalism by UNESCO, which accused them of treating the research and recovery of the vessels recklessly, without proper precautions, and actually damaging the sites. In response, Wolter claimed that UNESCO had a personal vendetta, writing on his blog, UNESCO hates Barry Clifford simply because he is the most successful pirate ship discoverer in history. Oh, okay, that must be it. Joseph Frontiera had a comfy little stint as a reality TV star background character on the history series Counting Cars, but then he blew it. Or at least that's what a lawsuit filed against him by his former employers at Counts Customs says. Frontiera was accused of embezzling around $75,000 from the shop and using the money to buy plane tickets and make a down payment on a Range Rover. How did he do this? His accusers think he made rubber stamp copies of the company boss's signatures so the company's checking account could become his own personal checking account. This scandal was big news for a while, but the case was closed in April 2019, obviously finding in favor of Counts Customs. At a certain point, one has to wonder when the History Channel is going to change their name, because they certainly don't seem to be heading down a trajectory of finding more historically accurate subjects to talk about. One of history's semi-recent shows is a scripted drama called Project Blue Book, which is another show about aliens, although this one actually had a lot of factually correct stuff in it. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, for example, was a real person who worked as a scientific consultant for a government program called Project Blue Book, which collected 12,000 plus accounts of unidentified flying objects. The problem with the series is that it just doesn't stick to the real story, and it's not because the real story is super boring either. It's because it's just not exciting enough for big ratings. So history dumped a whole bunch of made-up stuff into the mix and gave it a stir, so there's just enough untruth that viewers have no idea what's real and what's fake, as any good History Channel should do. Who doesn't love a good Kennedy assassination conspiracy theory? Most people actually, but that didn't stop History from airing an older docuseries called The Men Who Killed Kennedy, with additional episodes created for the 40th anniversary airing in 2003. The only people who really paid attention to the series were the relatives of Lyndon B. Johnson, because an episode called The Guilty Men implied that it was Johnson himself who plotted to kill Kennedy so he could become president. Johnson's family wanted to be able to rebut the episode, and History Channel tried to appease them by saying they'd hire some experts to review the new episode that they had based on the book Blood, Money, and Power: How LBJ Killed JFK. And then, if they found more inaccuracies, they promised to air another program that would publicly debunk the theory.
Who's at risk? Who's going to gain the most? Who wins in this deal? There's only one answer to that question, and that's Lyndon Johnson.
Well, their experts must have found something implausible in the episode, because History did issue an apology during a 1-hour special entitled The Guilty Men, A Historical Review, which concluded that the original episode should never have been broadcast.
No, it's wrong. It's corrupt, it's dishonest, it's deceitful, and which this film is in its entirety.
History's The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch was supposed to be a level-headed scientific analysis of the weird things that happen on the infamous Sherman Ranch in Utah. But when you really sit down and watch the show, you begin to suspect that maybe the team is just using the science to try and back up what they already think they know is happening.
Look at that.
It looks like an object above the tree.
And it happens right when the cow raises up.
There's even an astrophysicist on the program, but even his theories seem to lean more religious than scientific. By episode 2, viewers were already hate tweeting and abandoning the show in droves, with one disappointed viewer writing, "What investigation? It's just a bunch of dudes playing with high-tech toys." The Knights Templar had a cool name. They were mysterious, they were powerful, and they probably looked awesome in chainmail. The Knights were originally supposed to protect pilgrims crossing into the Holy Land, but they ended up being much more than just bodyguards. They also acquired the blessing of the Pope, who exempted them from taxes and other rules that applied to non-Templars, so they eventually became unusually rich. So rich that they set up a bunch of banks so pilgrims could withdraw money once they were in the Holy Land and not have to worry about getting robbed en route. Yes, the Knights were bankers. Not so according to History's Nightfall, though. In Nightfall, the Knights Templar are an elite fighting force, have a lot of affairs, and get sweaty, but still somehow manage to stay Hollywood attractive underneath all the blood. The show kind of has to embellish the Knights because they probably weren't really an elite fighting force so much as a powerful financial institution, and King Philip IV of France probably took them down because he owed them money. You might get a few guys on Wall Street to tune in for that version of the show, but History's viewers may actually prefer the fiction in this case. Somehow, the title The Men Who Built America made it past History's team of whoever it is that stops terrible titles from happening. As it turns out, The Men Who Built America celebrates the accomplishments of a bunch of really rich dudes. But it also just ignores millions of workers who actually got their hands dirty. And perhaps even more tellingly, downplays or even villainizes the contributions of the people who toiled to bring these visionary heroes' visions to life. One episode in the miniseries depicts the Homestead Steel Strike, but even though the show is a documentary, it gets a lot of the facts completely wrong, implying that there was something sinister about the strike and the workers who plotted against poor, wealthy Andrew Carnegie. And so it goes on, asking viewers to venerate all those wealthy men because they built some cars and bridges and loaned a lot of money to people. History doesn't exactly shy away from the morbid or the tasteless, so it should have surprised no one when they publicly announced they'd be making a documentary that would end spectacularly with the exhumation of a corpse. John Dillinger was a gangster who gained infamy in the 1930s for robbing banks and also for being handsome. The end of Dillinger's story is that he was taken down by the FBI and then buried under 3 feet of concrete. And ever since, there are people who say it wasn't really John Dillinger who got shot by the FBI that night. This rumor has persisted for so long that Dillinger's relatives decided to have him exhumed in order to finally answer the question, and History decided that it should be on video. As it turns out, though, it's not actually that easy to get permission to dig up a corpse, and Dillinger's family had to abandon the idea after a judge dismissed their case against the cemetery, which had denied permission for the exhumation. Before that decision, though, History decided to back out of the project. They didn't say why, but it might have had something to do with the fact that digging up corpses is morbid and morally bankrupt. Then again, that hasn't stopped History before. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite controversial channels are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.